Welcome to the Outlaws Podcast. I am Ryan, and today we are going to have a special guest join me to discuss fantasy baseball in the upcoming draft in the 2014 season. This is the first time I've ever called this guy on the phone, and he is a very important man in Little Rock, a very avid fantasy player, and a very important person in the world of fast food. I'm going to give this man a call right now, and we are going to break down the National League, give you a team-by-team predictions on certain players and what to expect, and a few real-life projections thrown in there as well. Without further ado, here's my call.
Driving to Little Rock. Nick, how can I help you?
Hey, Nick, it's Ryan O'Dell. I think this is maybe the first time I've ever called you before.
Oh, shoot, Ryan O'Dell. Oh, my gosh, I had absolutely no idea you were calling me.
Yeah, and just to let you know, you are on the air right now.
Oh, sounds fantastic.
So, I was wondering if you had some time to discuss a little National League breakdown, maybe a team-by-team, give our thoughts on each team, and maybe some playoff picks.
I'll tell you what, man, my family is out of town right now. I have got all the time in the world. So let's do this.
Good to know. And I'm wondering how that's going to work out because obviously the draft is at your place next weekend. Are they not going to need some daddy time next week, or how's that going to work?
Oh, no, shoot, they'll be okay. They needed to be gone this week. There is no way that we could have the type of draft party we need to have with my wife gone, because you guys do not want to eat my food. So she's excited to get the night spread going for you guys. And of course she'll take the kids and pound out like she did last time, but she'll make sure we're set up and ready to go. And let me say this, because I know some of y'all are starting to have kids. I've got 3 now, and my family leaves town like 4 times a year to go to Kansas City to see her parents, my parents. And of course I always have to work, so unfortunately I can't go. I'll say this, I love my family to death, but the first few days they're gone is freaking sweet, okay? It is nothing but like whiskey and shame, alright? And then by like the 5th day, I'm pretty ready for them to come home, man. But those first couple of days, I have a worthless bachelor, so I'm excited to enjoy it.
I'd imagine, man. I bet you get no privacy at home with 3 kids and especially a newborn, so you gotta take those rare chances when they come in. So
yeah, they're pretty rare, man. So what's going on?
I just kind of want to get your background, how you're approaching the draft. Do you have any magazines you read, any websites you check out, or how do you research to get ready for the draft?
How do I research to get ready for the draft? You know what, Ryan? I read the magazines, I read the websites, I do the mock drafts, and what I've found is that everything I believe I'm going to do the day I get to the draft completely goes away. Okay? Because depending on what you think you're going to take, perfect example is the shortstop, all right? You've got maybe 2 or 3 players that are worth spending any money on as far as getting a well-rounded deal, and that's, Ian Desmond, that's Gene Segura, and maybe Tulowitzki, but he could never stay healthy. So if you don't get one of those 3 guys, then all of a sudden, the shortstop position, all you're looking for is filling in a couple of stat areas, and I think that changes your entire draft landscape. Because if you land a Tulo or you land a Segura, you can get a lighter hitter at third base, or you can get a lighter, somewhere else where maybe you take more power. So I'll be honest with you, man, I don't know. I don't know what this draft is going to look like for me, because I'll be honest with you, I had no idea that I was going to take Mike Trout option.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I used to come into these auction drafts kind of with a set criteria of certain players I was going to go after, and you can never know for certain how much they're going to go for. And if you count on that too much and you're not able to be flexible, then it's going to cost you, and you're going to be all flustered when the draft happens. So that's probably the best approach to take.
I think the only guarantee on this year's draft is that Michael is going to try to be as cheap as possible. I think Michael is as close to Billy B as there is in this league. Not Brad Pitt Billy B, not that good looking Billy B, but normal Billy B. We're going to spend as cheap as possible, but for some reason it seems to work. Like the Oakland A's, Michael's teams are always real competitive.
Yeah, some things never change. We have Drew, who was thought to be a titan in the fantasy sports world his first couple of years, and he's fallen off the face of the earth. But you can always count on Michael to be so stingy with his cash and probably leave an extra $15 on board just despite us all.
I will say this. I did a mock draft last night, and with my family being gone, I think it was the first mock draft I did where I took it all the way to the very end. Usually I'll see where a lot of the big players go,
right,
and then I'll get out of it. But I went all the way to the very end, and it was just insane to me. Some of the money that was being spent. I think in that draft, Mark Trumbo went for like $22.
Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sitting here looking at this, man. I don't know if I was just a bunch of dumbasses, but it was like this crazy spending that it seems like so many positions this year are so deep. And if you can just be patient, I think you can put together a great team without spending a ton of money,
Yeah, so it sounds like a draft tailor-made for a Michael team, the way that he drafts. It's just kind of a tough situation because you always want to make sure you can get the bargains and get the last guy of a tier, so to speak, but you also want to make sure that you're not a team that doesn't have the top-level talent because there's nowhere to go but up. If you're with a team that's great, full of B-list players they're all solid, but I mean, how are you going to get better? I mean, I guess you can try to do a 2-for-1 trade or something like that, but that can be hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, and the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be a Yahoo slave, as far as looking at the dollar values. And a lot of the drafts I'm seeing, Bryce Harper's going to the high 30s, low 40s. That seems insane. I think I got him for, the low to mid 20s last year.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I don't even think he put together the kind of season I thought he was going to have when I spent that kind of money. So, sometimes Yahoo's overhyping guys, and I think you just have to be patient. And I think what you have to know more than anything more in the draft is how you want your team constructed. And then I think you just have to follow those guidelines, but don't be, tied to any certain things.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I guess let's go ahead and start getting into these teams because we've got about 15 to go over if we're going to do the entire National League. And I mean, there's probably a couple of teams we can just barely mention because, like the Miami Marlins, I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about there. But why don't we start this off with a bang and talk about the top of the class in the National League, the St. Louis Cardinals, the National League Central.
Yeah, you want to start off with National League Central?
Yeah, National League Central. And so, I mean, the Cardinals roster, it's not a whole lot different than it was last year. The main moving pieces, I guess, would be David Freese is out. They traded him straight up for Peter Borges, who I don't know about what you think, but I think he's going to be in a kind of a platoon with John Jay. I don't think it's his everyday job, but we'll see how that plays out. And other than that, the only other change that I can really think of is that Beltran's going to be gone and opening up some playing time for Matt Adams over at first base, and Craig's going to shift to right field.
Yeah, we saw that, and then of course they also went ahead and brought in, Johnny Peralta,
right?
Because they needed to have that offense there at shortstop. I think you're right on Burgos. I think that, and obviously this is not a player I think that would be owned in our league, but also I didn't think that Matt Carpenter had the kind of year he had. And what I found is if you're at the top of that Cardinals lineup and you get him on base, you're going to score a lot of runs. So who's to say a healthy year of Burgos? And I don't think that John Jay's going to take much playing time from him if he can stay healthy. The Cardinals, one thing about them, even though they're loyal to their players, and sometimes they're loyal to them to a fault. And David Freese probably doesn't have the highest feel of St. Louis ever, just based on what he did in the World Series in 2011. So to trade a huge fan favorite like that, I think they're getting somebody they feel is probably an upgrade from what they had in the field.
Yeah, I agree with that there. Let me ask you this. This guy's probably not going to get drafted in our league, but Colton Wong, former first-round pick out of Hawaii, he's going to be he's looking like the likely opening day starter at second base, and they're probably going to try to give him every opportunity to win that job. He obviously can run a little bit in the minors. He had a pretty good batting average, 300 hitter throughout all of his stops in the minors. He's not a big power guy, but can probably get you 5 to 10 or something like that. I don't know, but if they find a spot, and I guess this includes all the newcomers, I think there's an opportunity for Borges, Peralta, or Wong to hit second in the lineup. If one of those guys wins the job and routinely gets at bats at the second spot in the order in front of Craig and Holiday, is that somebody that you're going to look into, or are you looking more at the player individually and not so much the lineup that's hitting behind him?
I'm less inclined to take Berrios to second versus if he was hitting leadoff. Now, I think that Matt Carpenter, where I think they're making a mistake, is I think he's a true number 2 hitter because he drives the gap a lot. He makes great contact. I think you need to get Berrios ahead of him. That's just my opinion, but I think Matt Carpenter should be the number 2 hitter. I don't think it's going to be that way. I think he's going to bat lead off. I think Berrios is bat behind him. And then I assume Berrios' speed, that opens up a lot of bunting possibilities. But yeah, I think anybody hitting in front of Craig, Holiday, Adams is going to score a lot of runs if they can get on base. So who knows? I mean, Berrios might end up being ownable. Who would have thought that, like I said, with Carpenter do what he would have done last year?
Yeah, if he gets the everyday at bats at second spot in the order, which I don't really think is going to happen, but if he does, he's one of the fastest players in baseball. If he stays healthy, he could swipe 40 bags and score a lot of runs hitting second. Just to talk about the Cardinals, the pitching staff is pretty much intact from what it was last year. Jaime Garcia, it's a big question mark if he's going to be ready opening day. Probably not. Carlos Martinez is kind of auditioning for that job, as well as Joe Kelly. Either one of those guys, which one of those guys do you like more if they were to win the job?
I think as far as the starter, I think I prefer Joe Kelly. I just think Martinez's stuff is so electric that it's perfect for the 8th inning. And I think sometimes, guys need to really kind of accept what they are. And I think the Rosenthal's finally accepted that he's a closer. You hear him sometimes say, I still want to start, but the guy is just so electric on the back end. You need to have that. And that, really, that's what got the Cardinals the World Series last year. It was once it got to the 7th inning, they weren't giving up runs, and Martinez was a huge part of that in the 8th inning. I would rather see him lock that spot down because, and Brian being a Cardinals fan like I am, we play for October. What happens in May and June doesn't matter too much to St. Louis because we expect the playoff. That 5th starter becomes irrelevant come playoff time. And so if somebody's going to be bumped out, I want it to be Joe Kelly, and I'd rather see Martinez locking down the 8th inning.
Yeah, I think that's best for the team. If I wanted to take a shot on, in fantasy purposes, who would I rather have? I think Joe Kelly would probably end up being the better guy, but I would rather take the chance on Carlos Martinez if that makes any sense, just because his upside's a lot higher. Joe Kelly's he can throw really hard, but his strikeout rate is not overly impressive. I think it's somewhere around 6 Ks per 9, and Martinez is a guy that could get you about a strikeout per inning. And so he's obviously a lot more wild too, so there's a lot of downside with Martinez as well. But he's got good pedigree, and if I was going to take a shot on one of them for fantasy purposes, I'd take Carlos Martinez. So
I was looking at their roster earlier, and they are one of the few teams in baseball. They might be the only team that ends up having all 5 starters owned in the fantasy league.
Right, that's a good point.
Think about it.
And what's even crazy about it is that there's 2 or 3 guys waiting in the wings that could be in most rotations that would also have a chance to be owned, like a Jaime Garcia. He's normally a guy that's owned in fantasy when he's healthy.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in real life if you're the Cardinals. As far as fantasy purposes, just to tie this up, I look at a couple of guys on here, obviously Matt Holiday and Yadier Molina are your must-owns. I'll be really curious to see how Johnny Peralta bounces back from this PED deal. Because I think in that lineup, he's not got a lot of pressure on him. I think he'll probably end up batting about 7th or so. Can really be a good producer because, I don't think the expectations are going to be so high, but I think that he's going to get a lot of good pitches. I think he can capitalize on that.
Yeah, you're right. As a true hitter, he can hit. He's not a speed guy, and he's not a great defensive player, but he can hit, and that's exactly what they've been missing in the middle of the diamond there. They have not had any offense from the shortstop position in a while, so they really need that. Let me ask you this: 2 rookie pitchers for the Cardinals last year, coming into the rotation, expected to win the job. Obviously, Shelby Miller and Michael Wacha. Which one of those 2 guys do you like better?
It's hard to say because I think that if it came down to draft day, and if I were to end up with either one, I think I would be okay. They seem to be the same pitcher. I like Wacha's makeup a little bit better. He seems to be more the Adam Wainwright style pitcher, which is, just give me the damn ball. Nothing seems amazing.
Yeah,
I think Shelby Miller, it gets in Shelby Miller's head a little bit. He didn't even sniff the playoffs, and they kind of mentioned that they were trying to rest him. But if you've got a superstar like that, you've got to find a way to get him in. But I just think that maybe at times the lights get a little too bright for Miller. So I would rather have Waka, but I think I'd be okay with either one, and I'd be okay with Lance Lynn too, because for fantasy purposes, Lance Lynn really seems to get it done for anybody that owns.
Right. Lance Lynn is the forgotten man, and he is a guy that is just so hot and cold. Always, the last 2 or 3 years, he's had that blazing hot start for the first 2 or 3 months of the year, and then he really just falls off in the second half, which is kind of strange because you see him as a big guy that you would think had the built-up endurance and whatever, but for some reason just hasn't been able to put it together for an entire season. All right, I guess let's move on to the second team. We'll say in the NL Central, we'll go through all the teams. The runners-up, the team that the Cardinals beat in the divisional round, the Pittsburgh Pirates. So I'm looking around, and it looks like their lineup is pretty much the same as it was last year. I don't see a lot of changes. So I'm just going to ask you about the guys that have the biggest question marks around them. We all know that McCutchen is a top 5, top 6 pick. That's pretty much the consensus on him. But what do you think about their young players on the left side of the infield? You got Pedro Alvarez and Starling Marte. Those guys that you're interested in on draft day?
Yeah, Pedro Alvarez is interesting. The reason why I say that is, depending on what you want out of third base, Pedro Alvarez would be a fantastic pick. I think you can probably get him for anywhere from like $11 to $13, and that's not a bad price to pay for 30 home runs and 100 RBIs. You need to accept the fact that he's probably going to hit about 240. But if you find yourself in a situation where you do have 3 or 4 high average guys, then I think you can sustain that, and then you end up getting a great power hitter at third base. I like Pedro Alvarez a lot. Jordy Mercer, I probably wouldn't take. I just don't think there's enough there. Honestly, with the shortstop.
Yeah.
And then the other person on the team I'm not going to touch is Gabby Sanchez. One person I wanted to ask you about, because it seems like he goes through these periods where he just gets blazing hot and cools off, with Jose Tabata.
Yeah, he does.
Like he'll hit a 1, 2, 3 month stretch where he's blazing hot, and then for the rest of the year he just kind of disappears.
Yeah, you said it. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. It was a year or two before you played with us, and Derek had picked him up at the very beginning of the season, and he started off the season with like 3 home runs in the first 3 games and stealing bases like crazy. And man, I was trying to get Tabata, and Derek would not trade him for anything. And after about 2 weeks to begin the year, he completely fell off the face of the earth. But he does have he's obviously got great speed, and he's got some power to him. But he's not somebody that I'm buying in as being able to sustain that over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'm looking at their roster, and I think the Pittsburgh Pirates are a great team. And I think if there's one team in real life that's going to get St. Louis a run through the Metro, I think it's going to be the Pirates. But I really only see about maybe 3 or 4 guys on the entire roster that I'd really want to own.
It's kind of strange because, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say that it's strange that a team that's so good in real life has so few players that are going to be relevant in fantasy.
Yeah, and they're all just they're working parts together. They're going to have to hope that the Starling Marte of last year is for real. And I think Lil Ben's probably hoping that too. Did he own him last year?
Yeah, he did. He was up and down with Marte.
Yeah. So but you look at the rest of it. Neil Walker, no. Russell Martin, probably not. Gabby Sanchez, hell no. So I'm looking at this roster and going, there's really only 3 or 4 guys that you're like, they need to be drafted. They need to be owned. And that's being gracious to Marte, saying he's going to come back. And I don't even know if I would spend the kind of money he's going for. It seems like he's going to what?
Oh, man, he is going, I think you're right. And he's going way, way more than I'm willing to go. So he will definitely, he's probably the number 1 lock that'll not be on my team this year, because I think his O rank, or however, Drew loves the O rank, it's in the top 50, which is way too high. I mean, I'd much rather have a Matt Holliday for a similar price.
They're trying to put Starling Marte up in the same group of one of the teams we're going to talk about pretty soon. That's Carlos Gomez. And I don't think those are the same players at all.
Yeah, I don't either.
Not at all. I do want to ask you one question, though.
Okay.
There's one pitcher on the Pirates staff that is really just a hot commodity right now, and that's Garrett Cole.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him as well. Obviously, the former number 1 overall pick of, I can't remember what year it was, I guess like 2012, 11, something like that. But anyway, the former number 1 overall pick. I owned this guy for a little bit last year and watched him pitch some. The thing that concerns me about Cole is that he really pitched to contact a lot last year. He can throw hard. He can throw in the upper 90s. But I read a lot of stuff about him prior to when I picked him up and said that he really wasn't concerned about going after strikeouts. He's going to pitch into contact and try to go deep in games, which is great. But for fantasy, I'm looking for strikeouts. So I think he's probably a better real-life pitcher than he will be a fantasy asset. And he did have some strikeout history in his minor league career prior to last year, but I don't know if you realize it, but in AAA, before he got caught up last year, his strikeout rate was like 5.5 or 6 strikeouts per 9. So that concerns me.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he had 100 strikeouts last year and 117 innings.
Yeah, so he obviously picked it up when he got in the majors for whatever reason.
Yeah, but, will those numbers sustain over an entire season? It's hard to say. He's going, and I think what's happened is these stories come out, these articles come out, and it gains traction and momentum. And all of a sudden, Garrett Cole, who if we did a mock draft a month ago, probably would have gone for $14, is now going for 20. So all of a sudden he's starting to go from almost like Chris Sale type money, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think he'll get you a lot of wins just because he's pitching for the Pirates. But I think that if he were pitching for like San Diego or pitching for someone like that, where the wins weren't as readily available, you might look at his case per 9 and look at his ERA, which is about 3.2, 3.3, and say, he would maybe almost look more like Andrew Cash. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or somebody like that. So, I think that he has the benefit of that, but I think he's definitely being overhyped right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next team. I guess this is probably the team that pretty much everybody's going to be picking to finish in the top 3 in the division. That's the Cincinnati Reds. Major change that I can think of off the top of my head is no Shin-Soo Choo at the top of the lineup anymore, and in comes Billy Hamilton to lead off. And obviously he's got a lot of question marks surrounding his batting, and if he can get on base enough to steal those bases like he did in the minor leagues. What's your take on Hamilton?
What's my take on Hamilton?
Yeah.
Well, I think that he's a downgrade from Choo. I'll say that, because I think that Choo brought a lot of things to the table. With Billy Hamilton, you're buying one thing. You're buying steals. Okay? And so I guess it just depends on how important that category is to you. From the standpoint of how many guys you want to have contribute in that category. I think if you get a situation where you end up with a combination of, say, Gene Segura and Cargo, okay, you don't need to touch Billy Hamilton. And especially not for the dollars he's going for, $16, $17, $18, for a guy that really hasn't proven himself. I mean, I know that he had a ridiculous amount of steals in just a very short sampling last year, but he's got to get on base to make that happen. And it doesn't seem to me like the guy could really hit where it's going. So, maybe he'll change my mind over the course of the full season. But I think losing Choo hurts me. I think this team is a deadlock for third place, maybe fourth, depending on what the Brewers do, because they didn't do much to make their team better over the offseason.
Right, and what they did do is they locked up Homer Bailey to a big contract, 6 years, $100 million plus. And they've got Matt Latos coming back, so they've got a couple of nice pitchers at the top of the rotation. Personally, I like Homer Bailey okay, but I don't think I would have spent that kind of money on him.
I don't know if they were confused. I mean, if you ever looked at Homer Bailey up close, he looks like Christian Bale. And so for some reason that always popped in my mind. But I don't know how you can give $100 million to a guy with a career 3.5 ERA. I just don't understand it, and he's projected as their number 3 starter. Okay, so your number 3 starter was $100 million. That was really their biggest move of the offseason. They let Choo walk away. They didn't bring him back, and I guess they get some addition by getting Ludwig back. He was out for most of the year last year, and as a Cardinal fan, I've always really liked him. And hopefully, if they get full healthy seasons out of Cueto and Latos, then they might be all right. But I think they're definitely the third or fourth place again.
All right, there's a couple players that I want to ask you about. First one is Brandon Phillips. He's kind of the boring player. Second, I mean, not in real life. He's an interesting guy that I think pretty much any Cardinal fan despises. But for fantasy purposes, he's been around so long. He's slowly declining. At least that's what we thought. Last year, 18 home runs, I think, for the 4th straight year, and he had over 100 RBIs. So he's obviously running a little bit less. Do you think that Phillips can keep it up for another year?
Brett Phillips is an asshole. But aside from that, yeah, I think that he's a good fantasy player. I mean, if you can get 100 RBIs out of the second base position, then I think you're in real good shape, especially for how much he's going to go for, which I think is anywhere from like the $11 to $13 range. I would definitely spend that kind of money for 100 RBIs.
And that's,
you know what I mean?
That's your range of choice, 11 to 13.
My range of choice?
I like
to live there. But, and what happens is I never draft Brandon Phillips. I always go into every draft going, I'm not going to draft that guy. I hate him more than any other baseball player just because of the comments he's made about the Cardinals.
Right.
And every year I end up with him. And I don't know how that is, but I always have him on my team. But it works out. I mean, like I said, 100 RBIs, and out of the 103 RBIs last year out of the second base position, that's hard to argue. Other than Robinson, I don't know where you just get those kind of RBIs.
Yeah, at second base, definitely not going to get that anywhere else. So we'll see if he continues to hit cleanup or not. I don't know if he will or not, but that obviously would take a hit on his RBI total if they're going to hit him higher in the order. Last guy that I want to ask you about on this team for sure is obviously one of the most electric, interesting players in all of fantasy. It's got to be Tony Cingrani. Guy was a strikeout monster last year. He's pretty much a one-trick pony. He throws his fastball. Since I owned him for parts of last year, I watched a lot of him. He must throw his fastball 85% of the time and throw a poor secondary changeup the other 15%. He's a two-pitch guy with that first pitch 85% of the time, I'd say. Can he really keep that up?
If it works. I mean, honestly, you talk about a true power pitch, okay, and a guy that's going to say, here, hit it. Cingrani's that guy. 120 strikeouts and 104 innings is quite impressive, okay? Now, can he keep it up? Yeah, probably. You got to figure you're pitching in the National League here. So
right.
you're gonna face pitchers, you're gonna face number 8 hitters that generally aren't very good. So yeah, I think he can keep those numbers up, and I think that sometimes pitching actually skews numbers. But yeah, I mean, I see no reason why. I think that over time, as he gets older, and he puts more miles on that arm, he will have to start developing some secondary pitches. He wants to have a long-term career. But yeah, right now, roll. If you can blow people away, then I'd say do it. Basketballs have a whole lot less wear and tear on your arm than curveball.
Yep, that's a good point. And what's strange about him is I guess it's just that delivery. It makes the batters say that it's really hard to pick up the ball from his arm slot. And he throws hard, but he doesn't throw in the upper 90s. He sits around 90, 93, 94, 95. But he blows it by people. I mean, they just do not pick up the ball very well at all from his arm. Moving on to the next team, and a team that is obviously, like most of these teams, is another Cardinal rivalry from a few years back. It's kind of hard to keep that rivalry going when you're down in the cellar now, but the Milwaukee Brewers. Ryan Braun's coming back. Are you concerned about these PEDs? Do you think he's going to have a drop in production, or do you expect a pretty similar numbers to the same old Ryan Braun?
Yeah, Braun's looked good this spring, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's already homered a couple times.
Yeah, so, it's hard to say. I think what's going to happen, I expect a little bit of drop in production because I think what will happen is he'll be more likely to wear down over the course of the year versus maybe in the past. And I'm not a steroid expert. I don't use them, but I would think that, it would keep your recovery time and it would make your bounce back from the little, bruises and injuries and things like that, where you can sustain that high level all season. So maybe towards the end of the season, they'll tail off pretty heavily in the past, but I think he'll probably come out of the gate on fire, so he's going to watch improve.
Yeah, I kind of think that you're probably right. I'm not as concerned about the PEDs as just the natural progression of it. Can he keep this up? He sat out a lot of time, and maybe the spring training will wipe the rust off or whatever. But I think to expect the production that he was playing at is hard for any player. So I don't know if you can attribute if he takes a dip directly to the PEDs or not. One of the guys that I was fortunate enough to pick up.
Is he worth $40?
$40. I think he probably is. depending on it, if I've already filled a couple roster spots at that point, and I'm going to be saving a spot for Trout this year, so we'll see how that goes. So yeah, I think I'd probably go 40 on him.
Okay.
Shortstop for the Brewers, a guy I was fortunate enough to pick up last year after Reyes got hurt, was Gene Segura. He obviously showed a lot of pop in the first half of the season, hit, I think, 11 or 12 home runs on the season, something like that, but about 90% of those came in the first half of the year. Really did little in the second half, and power-wise and a big dip in average. He probably hit like 330 in the first half and 250 in the second half. His splits are pretty crazy. Even his base stealing splits were pretty similar too, so he fell off a lot. Are you concerned about that, or do you think that's just a young player breaking down as the season goes along?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm not concerned about it at all. I think that with young position players, just like young pitchers, I don't think they know how to manage themselves throughout the course of the season. So he comes out, he's probably playing at 110%. When he first gets called up, it's exciting. He's ripping the cover off the ball, and eventually they just start to wear down. I think, in my opinion, and that's not to say that I would spend money on him on draft day, but I think that he is, if you end up with him, I think you end up with the best shortstop.
Wow.
For fantasy purposes.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is a bold statement, but I mean, think about, who are we comparing it to?
Well, you've got Hanley and Tulo and Reyes. So you like Segura better than – I guess you could throw Desmond in on that conversation. You like him better than Hanley and Tulo?
I do, because neither one of those guys can stay healthy.
That's true. Okay, I mean, Segura was an Iron Man.
Stay healthy. Reyes can stay healthy. His steals are down. I think that if you're looking at the two most consistent bets at shortstop, it's Gene Segura and Ian Desmond, in my opinion. Okay? Now, the other guys, it's going to be feast or famine. If they stay healthy, Hanley and Tulo are going to be awesome. But recent history has shown, and I've been heard by a couple of those guys already, that they can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good argument. I guess you're saying on a per game basis, you think Hanley and Tulo are better, but considering that Segura is going to be more than likely healthy throughout the course of the season, that you'd rather go with the guy that's going to be in the lineup than Tulo and replacement level shortstop for when he's out.
I think so, because think about how much it's going to cost you to get Tulo versus how much it'll cost you to get Segura. I bet you get Segura for the low to mid 20s, and I bet Tulo's going to cost you every bit of 35.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right on those values. Let me ask you this. Catcher, I drafted him last year. I cut bait on him early, and I thought he was dead. Brad picked him up. He was awesome. Jonathan Lucroy, a really good average hitter for a catcher, and I think he probably would have put together even better numbers overall if he had had a better lineup around him. Obviously, Braun missed a big portion of the season, and Aramis Ramirez did as well, so he didn't have a lot of lineup protection behind him. Do you like Lucroy as a top, let's say like a top 7 catcher this year?
Yeah, I do, because he's sustained those numbers. I mean, for the last 3 years. I mean, and his home run and RBI totals were up in 2013 without Braun in the lineup. So it seems like he's somebody who's progressively getting better. But he's hit for the last 3 years at 313, 368, 340. His on-base percentage average 265, 320, 280.
Wow.
That's great production out of a catcher. You talk about, you got the two big guys, Posey and Bauer, that are going to go for a decent amount of money. Then after that, LaCroix, you're probably going to be a good get for anywhere from $5 to $9, I think.
Yeah, I think Lucroy could kind of be a little bit of a poor man's Yadier Molina, post similar stats for a cheaper price. Probably not quite as good of an average, but what do you think about Carlos Gomez? I mean, from watching him play, I think that when you're just talking about how athletic he is, I think he's one of the best athletes in all of baseball.
Yeah, Carlos Gomez is fantastic, and actually, you know what, I hate the fact that he's a Milwaukee Brewer. I like him. I think he's a fantastic player, and I think that, that $30 spend, we talked about this a little bit earlier when, where Starling Marte was going, and I think how they're trying to kind of compare these two guys. I think Carlos Gomez is head and shoulders better than Starling Marte, in my opinion. If you're going to go for one of those two guys, I would go for Gomez steady. He's not going to be in a spot in the lineup where there's going to be a whole lot of pressure on him. I figured that they would have him back second, but I think they're going to bat him 6th or 7th. And I think you guys talked about this in the podcast the other night. But, I mean, talk about a great spot to be in. There's absolutely no pressure right there.
Yeah, he's obviously got all the physical talent, and he's shown a lot more power these last year and a half or so, which has kind of separated him from what he was before. When you get a guy that's capable of hitting 20 home runs and stealing 40 bases, that's very rare. And he's even, becoming a better average hitter too. So there's a lot of upside to Carlos Gomez. I think the main thing that was the knock on him last year was just his counting stats. His RBIs and runs weren't quite there. They were in, I think, the low 80s. And that's more a product of the lineup around him, so you can't really blame him for that.
No, I agree with that. I think Carlos Gomez would be a good addition to any team.
Now, the biggest weakness with this Brewers lineup has got to be their staff. I mean, the staff is not that good. It was horrible last year. This year they did bring in Matt Garza, which is obviously a big upgrade over whatever they had. But it's Garza, Gallardo, Marco Estrada, Willie Peralta, and Kyle Loesch. I mean, any of those guys interest you for fantasy purposes?
For $1. I mean, I think what they have is they've got 5 starters.
Yeah.
And you could probably end up getting any one of them for $1 towards the end of the draft.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. You got to think about what Loesch came into camp late last year. All right, so I think was he signed late into camp or he signed after the season started?
I think it was late into camp. I think he maybe missed like the first week of the season, or maybe he even made the opening. He didn't miss long if he did miss time.
Yeah, I think that when it gets down to it, when you get near the end of the draft, you're running out of money, you need some pitching. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a flyer on a Gallardo or an Estrada. Estrada's always had a great K-per 9, or Kyle Loesch. I think that you could pull in any of those. I think Garza will cost you a little bit more, but the other 3 I think you can snag for $1, and I don't think you can blame anybody for taking a flyer on them.
All right, and just to try to move this along a little bit quicker, and just buy or sell what Chris Davis and left field did for this team last year.
I don't know. I mean, honestly,
if you don't know, I think that's a sell.
I guess at this point I'll just sell. Okay, and it's hard to say. It was such a small sample size, and granted, he put up fantastic numbers for what he did. But when guys come up, sometimes pitchers don't have enough scouting reports on them and things like that. So they'll come out of the gate hot, and once there's enough tape on them, they learn how to pitch these guys. So. I don't know. I haven't even seen really where Chris Davis is going in college.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I think he's probably being bought for $1 or $2 at the end of drafts. Honestly, I haven't stayed through the end of a draft. The biggest problem with mock auction drafts, as opposed to the snakes, is that it takes about 2 hours longer. And I mean, there's not a lot of times where you can sit around at the computer for 3.5 hours just to do a fake auction draft. So it needs to be done. But
and bad, and I hate whenever you go into the room and it's a full room and 2 or 3 people don't show up.
Right.
So they're auto-drafted.
And that always happens. All right. Well, the last team in the National League Central where the good young players go to die, the Chicago Cubs. Starlin Castro, Anthony Rizzo. There's not a whole lot else to this team. You buying a bounce back for Castro or a breakout from Anthony Rizzo?
Can we just say the Cubs suck and move on?
We can, because I, for one, am not interested in Starlin Castro. Maybe for $1 or $2 for Rizzo, but he's going to go for more than that. I have no doubt about that when Brad's in our league. So,
I will say this: I think out of all the players in the team, I think Trailer Trash DeMarcus is probably the best one to own. But except the fact that you're not going to have wins out of him, his ERA isn't going to be bad, but he will get you a good amount of Ks. I think he went for over 200 strikeouts last year.
Yeah.
So I think you pick him up. I'm not worried about Castro or Rizzo. I know they're going to end up on Brad's team. What's probably going to happen is somebody's going to throw them out early to bleed money out of Brad. Let's not even waste time with this team. I've seen Junior Lake go on a lot of auction.
Really? That's interesting.
Go for $2, $3, $4.
Wow.
I don't even know who the hell that guy is.
I know he got hot for a little bit last year, but from what I understand, he's not a well-known prospect or anything. It sounds like wishful thinking more than somebody doing their homework.
I just think we just sit here and we just say the Cubs suck, and no self-respecting fantasy player, we don't anybody on their roster. I mean, just move on.
All right. Well, as we, I guess we'll do our wild card picks here at the end of the whole podcast. But go ahead and give me your National League Central winner. I mean, I don't think there's really a question about it, but just for the record.
No, I think the Cardinals will win the Central. I think it'll be somewhat close. I think the Pirates will be within 5 games. But I do think that the Cardinals will win the division.
Yeah, I don't mean to be cocky, but I kind of feel like the Cardinals are just going to run away with it this year. I have pretty high hopes for the Cardinals this year, and it's not really fair to say that it's World Series or bust. But I think if you don't make the World Series, I'd kind of be disappointed. But
and then the other part of that is, and maybe you're right, Ryan. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to surprise anybody this year. So, the Cardinals may have a different approach when it comes to playing them in the earlier parts of the season and kind of get that separation. So you're right. They might win the division by 10 games. So I think it's the Cardinals division.
All right, let's move it on to the National League West. Obviously, there's a pretty big favorite out here with the way that the Dodgers are spending money, so we'll just start off with them. They've got, I think if you were going to pick maybe 3 teams or so that you could just build a fantasy team off of 3 real-life teams, the Dodgers and the Cardinals would be at the top of my list. They've got a lot of good players, and let's just start off with the guy that gained I've been reported as about 20 to 30 pounds. Yasiel Puig bulked up to like 250 pounds this year. He went on a mini Mike Trout run last year. Are you buying Puig this year, or do you think that he was more of a fluke than anything?
I don't know if he's a fluke. I'm not buying into what he did for that stretch last season. I don't think he's that good.
Well, let me ask you this: like I think he hit 319, something like that last year. What do you expect from him in average?
I would put him probably around. It's hard to say because he's at the top of a very good lineup. But I would put him. I profile him right around a 285, 290 hitter. I don't think he's going to hit for as much power as say like Cespedes. Over the course of a long-term season. And the reason why I say that is I think he's like Harper. He's more of a reckless player. And it's fun to watch in reality, but I don't think it bodes well for fantasy. I think Puig's the kind of guy that could have some stints on the DL just for going out there and being an idiot.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that is just, and I had the same problem with guys like Jay Bruce. I had Jay Bruce on my team, and for some reason I watch way too much baseball on the MLB TV app, and I watch a lot of Puig's at bats, and some of them are just so nasty looking. I mean, he just takes some horrible swings, and a lot of that, you saw him really struggle against good pitchers in the postseason. So I'm a little concerned about his strikeout rate, but obviously he's got a 5-tool potential and could really help you out in a lot of different areas. So he's going to be a guy that'll be one of the most interesting players to see what they go for on draft day.
He can be fantastic when he gets his own way, and I think that's the problem. I think that his attitude is part of his problem in his makeup, and I think it's going to hurt his production.
In center field, we have Andre Ethier, and this is probably a year or two before you were playing in our league. I had picked up, or I guess I drafted Andre Ethier for like $5 or $6 late in the draft, and he was like the number 1 overall player in fantasy for the first like 6 weeks of the season. Then he got hurt, and when he came back, he was not the same. It was obviously more of a fluke than anything that he started off that hot, but would you even be willing to go a buck on Andre Ethier?
Not anymore, which pains me to say because I've always liked Ethier. I always thought he had a real sweet swing. And I've never liked the Dodgers, but I always liked him as a player. But probably not at this point. I don't think he gets enough playing time. You talk about Kemp coming back, and you got Crawford and Puig. I wouldn't save a roster spot for a full round.
That's a good point. I had forgotten that Kemp is not the depth chart that I'm looking at has Kemp as the backup, and that's just because he's been hurt so far. In left field, Carl Crawford. This guy used to be a first-round pick. He just doesn't run like he used to. Can't stay healthy. That said, I think there's probably a couple guys that are going to be willing to take a chance on him for single digits. Any chance you'd be willing to take Carl Crawford for, let's say, $5?
No, I'm sure let Drew have him.
And you know that if Drew wants him, that's your ultimate red flag.
I have learned that I am not going to go to battle with Drew over any player. So Kyle Crawford, I don't know, man. I guess he's been, he hasn't been too healthy this spring, has he? I think he's he's played sparingly, right? They're trying to treat him gingerly.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I can see the potential there hitting leadoff. With that lineup behind him, he could obviously score a lot of runs. But even with guys like Puig and Kemp and Crawford at the top of the lineup and Hanley, all these guys that have base stealing potential, I think that this is with the lineup being so deep, I think this is going to be a team that's not really going to want to run a lot because there's so many good hitters behind them where they don't want to take the chance that somebody gets thrown out when you've got a great hitter on deck or in the batter's box. So I kind of am tempering my expectations for all these guys on the base paths.
Yeah, I am too. I don't think you're going to get a lot of steals out of the Dodger lineup. I think they're going to be a lot like the Yankees were a couple of years ago. When you had A-Rod and Teixeira, they were more about just driving in the run. You didn't see a whole lot of steals. So I think this will be something similar because the last thing you want to do is have a guy get caught stealing Adrian Gonzalez batter's box. So you're not going to get much out of that. I think with the Dodgers, what you're going to get is you're looking for power. And you're looking for run scores.
And I don't mean to spend too much time on this team, but there's just so many players that are interesting for fantasy. We already talked about Hanley, so we'll skip over him. But Matt Kemp in center field, obviously he's a wild card. He's kind of up in the air right now if he's going to be ready for opening day. But if he does miss time, it's probably going to be like a week or maybe just that Australia series. Not much is what it sounds like. But he was just horrible last year. A lot of people think it was that shoulder injury that he had surgery on in the offseason prior to last year. I, for one, as a Kemp owner last year, I'm not going anywhere near this guy.
Isn't it crazy? Wasn't he a top 3 player?
He was. I mean, this is the ultimate five category player.
Yeah, you're talking, we're only a year or so removed from a $40+ guy on draft day. And now we're looking at it, and several people are staying away from him, or he might go for $10, at the most. And I don't know if you get the Matt Kemp from 2 years ago and you get him for $10. I mean, you're going to look brilliant. So it's hard to say. It's almost worth maybe if he does look like he's healthy, you take that risk because batting in that lineup. Matt Kemp was the superstar before they even had this type of arsenal.
Right.
So it's hard to say. I think that he's someone who's really going to be interesting on that.
Yeah, I mean, I said I wasn't going to touch him, but if you're thinking $10, I'm maybe taking for that. But I think he's going to go for more than $10. But you never know with our draft. I mean, a lot of people really. Yeah, well, a lot of people do like to stay away from those injured players. Like I think last year David Ortiz was hurt. Going into last year, I think he went for like $4 just because he missed the month of April. I mean, so those kind of guys are going to go for bargains a lot of the time that are injured, but there obviously comes a risk with those players. Real quick, you buying Ryu?
Yeah, I am. Just simply because of the offense that's behind him. I think he's another one of those guys who can chalk up a lot of wins for you. He has the benefit of getting to pitch against the Padres multiple times throughout the year. So I think that's going to be a benefit out there. I think that's a tough division. I think Arizona got better. But Ryu. When you talk about how much it's probably going to cost to get him, I think it's probably worth it. And the other pitcher on there that nobody is talking about is Dan Aaron. And I've always been a big Dan Aaron fan because he started out in St. Louis. He's another guy that's probably going to go for dirt cheap, and now he's pitching, in a pitcher-friendly ballpark with a team that's going to score a lot of runs. So I think that's another one you look at and say, he might be a good addition.
Yeah, Heron I think is probably a pretty safe bet to go for $1 at the end of the draft, and he's obviously got he's one of the best control pitchers in baseball, and he can strike out guys. My problem is that he has had a diminished velocity the last couple of years, and that he's been giving up a lot of home runs, but maybe that ballpark can help him out a little bit there, so he might be an interesting guy late in the draft. And you made a little segue there. You mentioned Arizona. We'll go ahead and get into the Diamondbacks. What do you make of Mark Trumbo this year? You mentioned that he went for $22 in a mock draft that you did. I don't think he's going to go for that much in our league, but I guess you never know. Do you think that he can hit 30 and 100 like he did last year?
It's doesn't have the benefit of slotting into that DH role from time to time. So having him out there as an everyday, and I think they're projecting him as the left fielder. You have to wonder whether or not his body's going to hold up across the course of the season. And if it does, then I think that's a good lineup. You talk about hitting behind Goldschmidt and Montero. I think he's going to get a lot of pitches to hit. And, Arizona is one of those parks that, can inflate the stats a little bit. I think, not $22. And like I said, that was just one mock draft that I was in last night. But, I think when you look at what some of the other first basemen are going to cost you, he might be worth grabbing. And I think he's going to have that eligibility as well. If you want to play him, I think he's going to have multiple position eligibility.
Yeah, I think he lost his third base eligibility. I think he's got his first base and outfield still, but I could be wrong on that. You mentioned first base, Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, he was just amazing last year. Hit over 300, 125 RBI, 36 home runs, 15 steals. I mean, there's really absolutely nothing that you could complain about from Goldschmidt last year. He's going number 3 overall in Yahoo Snake Drafts. That's his O rank this year. Do you think that's appropriate, or do you think that's maybe a spot or two too high?
It's hard to say. You could make an argument that you could put McCutcheon ahead of him. Just because of, I think you get more speed with McCutcheon, but I mean, gosh, it's hard to argue with the guy that hits, close to 40 home runs and steals 15 bases. That's just crazy production, and I've seen a lot of mock drafts where he's going for between $45 or $50. So you look at that and say, well, is that worth that kind of money? And if you spend it, I think that ultimately it will be, because I think he's probably the best offensive first baseman in the game right now, with the exception of Miguel Cabrera, who has moved back over to first base. Yeah,
good call on that. What about Patrick Corbin, one of the best rookie pitchers in baseball last year? He's going to be their opening day starter, a guy that comes in with good pedigree. And I usually liked guys that pitch in the NL West, obviously not with their home park in Arizona, but the National League West has gotten a lot better with the Dodgers lineup. Obviously, Arizona's not a great place to pitch, and then you got Colorado too. They even moved the fences in at Petco a little bit. But I still kind of like Corbin. What do you think?
No, I like Corbin a lot. And honestly, I don't know. And I haven't really been paying attention to how much he's going for. I think for me, it's just going to depend on how much it would cost to get him. He is the ace of their staff, like you say, he's going to be the opening day starter. Had a pretty nice season last year. 178 strikeouts, 108 innings. So he's not quite K for inning, but he is a very good pitcher. And I can't remember who owned him last year, but I remember I looked at that roster, whoever owned him, it might have been a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I looked at it several times ago, and I really want to figure out how to get this guy, but I just wasn't committed. And first of all, a little bit sucks to trade with anyway. But the other part of that is I just didn't want to pull the trigger on it. I think that if he stays in the $13, $14, $15 range, I think I'd take for that. But I wouldn't go up to $20.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you there. I think he's going to go for less than that too. So I think if I have the money at the time that he's nominated, I'll probably be in play on Corbin. I guess let's move over to the Rockies, a team that obviously has got no pitching, so there's pretty much not even a reason to talk about any of their pitchers except maybe Jorge De La Rosa, but that's maybe even a stretch there. They got some interesting guys offensively, and a guy that hit, I think, over 25 home runs last year is Willen Rosario, a guy that's really forgotten a lot about. I don't feel like he gets the credit he deserves as how good he's been the last couple of years.
No, he does get ignored and overlooked. I don't think Yahoo gives him the respect that he deserves as far as a catcher from an offensive standpoint. He does bring a lot of power, which is hard to find in the catching position. So that's definitely a positive. And it doesn't seem like it would take a whole lot of money to get. So if you can spend $5, $6, $7 on a guy that's going to hit 20 to 25 home runs, then I think you have to pull that trigger.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Obviously, I got to ask you about the guy you owned last year. I went back and looked at the ranks last year, and I couldn't believe, and I knew he was good for your team last year, but I couldn't believe that Michael Cuddyer, in less than 500 at-bats, finished as a top 40 player overall. And, Michael Cuddyer is he's had some good spurts throughout his career, but he's never been on a tear like that. It looks like he's not getting a whole lot of respect again this year. Could you see yourself taking Kadire and as your third outfielder for $6 and laughing away with that?
I picked Kadire up last year, and that was as good of a pickup as I think I made all season. You know what's strange is for both years I've been in the league with y'all, I've owned Michael Kadire and Dexter Powell. I've owned them both. And I started out, really the reason why I have both those guys was I played them when they were at home in Colorado because they would be off the charts on their staff. And last year, even when Kadire was on the road, I could take Lyle Lax. He had such a great year. You know, it seemed like every night it was something, whether it was going 2 for 4, he had an RBI or a run scored. He just slowly compiled over the whole year, but he's just a consistent player. And I don't know how much he's going for this year, but you know, hopefully nobody gets too excited about him because I do love my little guy.
All right, and one final question with this team before we move on. Are you buying either Nolan Arenado or Justin Morneau as being fantasy relevant this year?
I'm buying Justin Morneau to be fantasy relevant. I think so. I mean, the guy has proven that he's a hitter, you know, and you put him in a place like Colorado, I think this could revitalize his career. I think he can get back to that, you know, 20 home run range, something like that, especially when you look at, you know, Cargo and Tulo hitting in front of him. I think he's going to get a lot of good pitches today.
All right, and moving on to the San Francisco Giants. I have to bring this guy up to lead the discussion on the Giants. Hunter Pence finished 9th overall last year, and he never gets any respect. He's still ranked very low in the Yahoo rankings, and he's only 31 years old. I would say that I'm not as I don't know. I can kind of get why they're not as high on him, but the stats have always been better than his projected rank, and I think that I would kind of hedge a little bit in what his actual rank and his preseason rank is, and I'd put him more as like a top 35, top 40 player, somewhere in between that range. Am I too high on him, or do you think that Yahoo has it right?
I don't know why we're even having this conversation. Hunter Pence has been awesome his whole career. I mean, when he was in Houston, he was fantastic. He used to tear the Cardinals up. And I think what happens is you go out to a place like San Francisco out on the West Coast, and players tend to kind of get forgotten. You know what I mean? And Hunter Pence put together a fantastic season last year. And I have no reason to believe why he wouldn't do it again. I mean, I think he's going to stuff the stats again.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, this guy, I could be wrong, but I feel like he never misses any playing time, and he gets you a little bit of production in all 5 categories. And maybe there was a little fear playing in a bigger ballpark in the West Coast where the ball doesn't fly as well, but he still put up 27 home runs, so I think he answered all those questions.
I think it just depends on what kind of players you're looking for. I think if you end up with, you know, there's guys that fall into that group, like the Hunter Pence, Matt Holliday, you know, where they're guys that just flat out produce. Yeah, they're not going to have a 3 home run game. They're not going to have a game where they drive in 7 runs. But over the course of their entire season, when you look at their body of work, they end up being the guys that are worth every penny. They don't get hurt. They stay in the lineup. So, yeah, Hunter Pence is worth what he goes for. I'll tell you that.
Over at third base, we've got Pablo Sandoval, and once again, another story about his big weight loss, which is coming routine. It's kind of a yearly announcement how he's in the best shape of his life. Sorry if I'm quoting you wrong on this, but I thought that you may have said this after last year's draft where you thought Pablo Sandoval was one of the best bargains of the draft. I'm pretty sure he went for like $6 or $7, and that could have been somebody else. I don't remember for sure. But obviously he's great when he plays. He just can't stay healthy. Would you be comfortable drafting Pablo Sandoval as your one and only third baseman if you could get him for single digits?
If it's single digits, yeah, absolutely. He's in a contract year. Okay, so you know, a lot of times those contract years, those numbers tend to inflate. And the dude actually hasn't done a lot of weight this year. I mean, he looks pretty good. I saw a picture, and he's definitely gotten in shape. So yeah, I mean, if you get a player like Sandoval, and if he could stay healthy, which I think there'll be more of a motivation for him to do so this year because he wants to get paid, then yeah, I think that's a good amount of money. Now I want to ask you about a player that they have on the roster, and that's Brandon Belt. Okay, because I read an article about him, and they have him slotted as number 3 hitter right now, and he was I think he was top 3 last year in the National League in doubles.
Yeah, he's definitely had a lot of doubles.
Well, and what they're saying is that at some point these doubles have to start leaving the yard. Okay? So do you think Brandon Belt's one of those guys this year you can get cheap that might be on the verge of a breakout season?
To be honest, I thought that was going to happen last year. I'm sure nobody remembers this, but I took Brandon Belt with a dollar buy last year because he had a monster spring, and so I'm kind of reluctant to take that same chance twice. But to be honest, he was hitting a lot lower in the lineup. If they're actually going to hit him third or fourth or however high, that's going to be a boost to his value, hitting around better players with better lineup protection. So I could see myself taking him for cheap at the end of the draft, but I am a little reluctant just because he didn't work out for me last year.
And I'm looking at the CBSSports.com right now, projected lineups for 2014, and it has them projected hitting third right ahead of Buster Posey.
Yeah, and I could see that. So I guess they have Hunter Pence hitting fifth?
They have Hunter Pence.
Man, their own team doesn't give him the respect. You got to hit Hunter Pence third or fourth. Come on.
I know. Even his own team doesn't give him any love.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the starting rotation, and 5 All-Stars, 2 Cy Young Award winners. I think Tim Hudson, maybe he did win one. I don't think he has, but I know he's at least finished in the top 3 in the Cy Young. And then that doesn't even include Bumgarner. So Bumgarner probably has finished top 5 before. They've got a lot of accomplished pitchers. Most of them on the wrong side of their career. Are you worried about what Matt Cain did last year, or you think that first half of the season was a fluke, and you think he's going to be back to the Matt Cain from 2012?
I'm hoping he gets back to the Matt Cain from 2012 because I think somebody's going to get him for a steal this year. When you talk about what you've had to pay for Matt Cain in the past, and if he can bounce back, then I think that you're going to end up with great value. The one that I'm most interested in, to be honest with you, is Lincecum.
Interesting.
They obviously, and what did they do? They re-signed him, right? Gave him pretty decent money.
I think it was 2 years for like $35 million, something like that.
Yeah, so you're talking $17.5 million a year for a guy who, has kind of been a joke in our league for the last couple of years. So, it'd be interesting to see if he can right the ship, because he might be another one of those dollar guys you can get at the very end that might just end up paying off.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I've been kind of out on Lincecum for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of worked out for me. He obviously has the strikeout potential. The biggest problem with him is just his control. If he can ever get that control figured out, then he will be very valuable.
Well, that and his small frame doesn't help either.
Yeah.
So, that just doesn't hold up well over time. But who knows?
Let me ask you this: if you were going to own Lincecum and you saw him out there on the mound, are you hoping that you see the Lincecum with the short hair or the long hair?
Long hair.
Yeah, I agree. He just looks like a little. He looks like a high schooler with his short hair.
Yeah, no, I don't know what that's all about. I want the surfing, pot smoking, long haired. I want him to be high on the mound because those were the days for him, and I don't know what he's doing. He needs to get back to what works.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess what are we? The last team of the division, the Padres. Really not a whole lot interesting about this team. I guess I'll ask you about PED abuser Everth Cabrera. I don't really get why some of these non-home run hitting players are on the PEDs. I don't know the effects that they're getting from it. Personally, I'm not worried at all about them with the PEDs. I think you've kind of agreed with me on most of that you're not overly concerned about that. Any thoughts on Cabrera? Are you interested in him?
I think it goes back to what I said at the very beginning about, it depends on what you want out of your shortstop. If you don't spend a lot of money on those big name guys and you're looking just to fill certain staff, and you're looking to get steals, why wouldn't you grab Everth Cabrera? And I will say this, and I listened to your guys' podcast the other night, how you guys are not as high on the Padres as I am when it comes to fantasy value. I think there's at least 3 or 4 guys on this team that I think need to be owned. That I would own anyway. That's not to say I'm going to draft them, but I like some of the guys on there and the way they're going to contribute.
Are you talking just for their hitters or for their entire team?
I'm talking about for their entire team. I like Everth Cabrera. I like Jed Jorko. Okay, the guy was injured for a lot of last year, or not a lot, but a good portion of last year. Still hit 24 home runs.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to talk about if he's healthy, you can get 30-plus home run production out of second base at what he's probably going to go for. I think that's a good situation there. You talk about going down their pitching staff. Andrew Cashner, I think is a pitcher that you can get for not a ton of money, but it's going to put up real good numbers. And then Ian Kennedy, he's so up and down, but you get him in Petco, which is more of a pitcher-friendly park versus where he was last year, which I think was Arizona, right?
Yeah.
So you get him in that pitcher-friendly park, and he can get back to that. Possibly get back. Not say get back to that 20-win form he was at a few years ago, but if you can get 14, 15 wins out of it, I think it's going to cost you to get him. Then I think he'd be a good shape. Yeah,
well, the thing about Kennedy is that if you look at his peripherals, he's got a great strikeout rate still, and his walk rate is still pretty good. So I guess he's just been serving up a lot of home runs. So with the move to Petco, maybe you're onto something there.
Maybe I don't know. I just think there's some value because I think the Padre players are going to be discounted and overlooked, and then I think some guys are going to pay off big time.
And are you going to buy or sell a Josh Johnson bounce back?
I'm going to sell.
I pretty much have owned Josh Johnson like the last 3 or 4 years, and man, he's just so good when he pitches, except for last year, obviously. I kind of interested in him for $1 or $2, just because San Diego. I like the venue he's in, but I kind of have a man crush on him, so I'm probably not the right person to ask.
Yeah, you're jaded by his beauty. I will let you have it.
All right, let's move over to the National League East. And man, we are pushing an hour 6 right now, so we'll try to finish this up pretty fast for Derek, who's the only person still listening. And it's kind of this is.
You might have to break this up.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I don't know many people that are going to listen to this entire thing all the way through, but we'll see. Or maybe they can just break it up themselves and they listen to it. But anyway, we'll start off with the Nationals. I think the Nationals are probably the most interesting team in the division. You've already kind of given your thoughts on Bryce Harper, and I kind of agree with you there. I thought it was always absurd that they even compared Trout to this guy. I know that they both have the big pedigree and all the hype surrounding him, but Harper has never been half the player Trout has been in the majors, and that's saying that even with Harper putting out some decent stats, but Trout is just so far above him. I think it's unfair to compare the two, but I listened to a ESPN podcast today, Eric Karabell. He says that he thinks Bryce Harper is going to win the MVP this year. If I had to give you like 10% odds on that, would you take it, or do you think even that's too high?
No, I'd go 10% on that. I mean, there were times last year, and I owned him, so there were times where he was just absolutely awesome. I just don't know. And what's funny about Bryce Harper is that there's a lot more hype around his persona than I think sometimes what he does on the field. All right, and if he ends up in a situation where, say the Nationals are better this year than they were last year, not that they were a bad team last year, but I don't think they had expectation, then maybe he does have that kind of year. He's not going to have a Mike Trout type. But I do think he could end up being a top 5 outfield. In fantasy baseball, if he stays on the field and if he can stay hot for longer stretches. Last year he would disappear at times.
Yeah, like you mentioned, everybody thought he was on his way to an MVP after that hot April, and he fell off a little bit after that. So when he's hot, if he can just sustain those hot streaks, then you could have a guy with monster potential in the power department and a guy that can still steal 20 to 25 bases maybe. So he's got the tools, so he's just got to put it together still. At second base, I think there's a competition there, but everybody really expects Anthony Rendon to win the job. He's obviously a big-time prospect. He doesn't really run a lot, but he's known to be like a good average hitter, maybe a poor man's Martin Prado right now. Would you consider taking him at the end of a draft?
Yeah, at the end of the draft. I mean, if you got down to it and all your money went somewhere else, and you needed a second baseman or you want to take a flyer, then yeah, I think you'd have to be interested in taking Rendon just based on the lineup he gets in alone.
And moving over at shortstop, you mentioned your love for Segura, and you mentioned that the reason you're so high on him is because you're not really a believer in Hanley or Tulo to stay healthy. Considering that, would you be willing to take Desmond ahead of Tulo and Hanley as well?
Well, just based on if you're not willing to spend $30, $35, $40 on a shortstop, and then you sit there and have Ian Desmond staring you in the face, and I don't think Ian Desmond's a 20 home run guy like he was last year. I think he's somewhere between 15 and 18. But I mean, the guy is really consistent. So I think you know what you're going to get out of him, and plus he's going to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I actually think he's got. I'm going to disagree with you on the power. I think he's a guy that I would expect if I was going to draft him to hit closer to 25 home runs. I think the power is legit. At third base, Ryan Zimmerman, he's just been so up and down throughout his career. It's almost impossible to guess the season where he's going to stay healthy, number one, and put up the numbers, number two. I think I'm probably out on Ryan Zimmerman this year. But a lot of times when you say you're out on somebody, that's when he bounces back and stays healthy and goes for a good price because everybody's thinking the same thing. Which camp are you in on Zimmerman, in or out?
I'm probably more on the outside only because when I look at this lineup, and this is just projections, so it's not 100% certain, they haven't been second. If I look at what I'm going to spend on my third baseman, I don't want my third baseman to be a number two hitter. Okay, I want him to be a middle of the order, guy that's going to, rip the ball out of the yard. And Zimmerman has shown talent, but he's also shown some durability issues over the last couple of years. And, I think that, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't his power numbers declining?
Oh, yeah, they've been declining. I think he probably hit around 24 or something like that home runs last year. And when he was in his prime, he had like a 36 home run season. So he's definitely been in a decline in the power outage. Even 2 years ago, he went on a real big tear in the second half and hit like 20 home runs in the second half. But the first half of the year only hit like 4 or 5. He's just been so up and down and streaky. I kind of like the more consistent players.
Yeah, if you're going to spend your money on third base and you want to get a power hitter, because Zimmerman's not going to steal you a lot of bases or anything, then I think you're better off spending the extra money and getting a Longoria or a Beltran. Yeah,
or even going less and saving, $8 or whatever and taking Alvarez. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you own Steven Strasburg last year?
I did.
I thought you did. You didn't trade him away, did you?
I don't remember. Man, I traded away so many people.
I don't
traded away
either.
Mike Trout. So it's not hard to believe that I didn't trade away Steven Strasburg at one point.
I mean, is this the season that Strasburg takes it? He's been great. He was great last year. He wasn't, top 5 great. Is this the year that he is top five great?
I don't know, man. We've been waiting on that for a while. It's hard to say. I think there's just so much about him that is interesting, and as far as the upside standpoint, that he's always going to continue to get drafted high. But I have no reason to believe why he wouldn't. I mean, he pitches in, other than Atlanta, he pitches in a terrible division. So
wait a second. You don't think the Marlins and the Mets have a good lineup?
We'll get there. I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay. Yeah, and the Nationals have a great starting rotation, and you mentioned a guy, Fister, that it sounds like you're a little higher on him than I am. He's obviously a control artist, and I think his strikeout rate is it's not quite as bad as I made it out to be. I think it's closer to 7.5 per 9. It's gotten a little better over time, and obviously the move you mentioned to the weaker division is only going to help him.
Yeah, I mean, that was a K rate in the American League Central. Okay, so, you move him over to the National League East, and he gets to pitch against those teams we already mentioned. I think Doug Fister's going to have a huge year. I like Doug Fister a lot. I had him last year, and he was actually one of my better pitchers as we got later into the season. For a number 4 starter and what I think he's going to cost, Doug Fister's going to be a good buy.
I actually drafted Fister last year, and I traded him too early. I can't remember what it was for, but there was some position that I desperately needed, and I think I made a bad trade there. I can't even remember what it was, but yeah, he's very consistent when he's in the lineup. He's also one of those guys that you're not real worried about when he's going against a good lineup. He seems to be pretty even keel. He doesn't get lit up very often.
Yeah, Fister's solid.
Any other players you want to talk about on the Nationals?
On the Nationals, no, not really. I mean, I guess there's one guy who I think never gets as much love as he should, and that's Jason Worth. Jason Worth had a fantastic season last year. The guy just is as consistent as they come, but it doesn't seem like you ever hear much about him.
Yeah, Jason Worth, he sucks. I wouldn't spend a couple bucks on him. I think he's overrated. So I probably wouldn't touch him.
That's a good poker face.
All right, let's talk about the Braves. Man, they've been spending a lot of money, on their own players. They've been signing a lot of long-term deals with these guys. They've got a lot of young talent as well in the rotation. Julio Teheran, Mike Minor, Chris Medlin. They've got some interesting pieces. Which one of those young pitchers are you most interested in?
I'm most interested probably in Medlin. And I think that has to do with what he did. It was it in 2012, right?
Yeah.
It was 2012 where he had that great year. I think last year he battled some injuries. Was that right?
I don't even know if he
Was
better.
he hurt last year, or did he just have a rough year?
I think he started off slow, and he actually quietly finished the year pretty well. Kind of, not nearly as dominant as he did in 2012, but his end of the year stats weren't too bad.
I think all those young pitchers are really good. I had Alex Wood late in the year last year, and he did real well.
Yeah, good call on Wood. I totally forgot about Alex Wood. He's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and Brandon Beachy, if he can come back and return to form at all, with where he was a couple of years ago, I think that I look at all these Braves pitchers as middle of staffs where all 5 starters might be on.
See, I'm off my game. I had forgotten about Beachy as well. And I have to be honest, I'm probably in on at least 4 of these 5 guys. If I got the money at the time when they were nominated. But I really like this stuff a lot. A lot of people are kind of there's a lot of believers in Andrelton Simmons. I for one think that he's more of a defensive player. He did hit 17 home runs last year, kind of quietly. Any chance you don't get all your shortstop targets and you decide to wait it out to the end? Any chance he might be a guy that you say, "Oh, this will be my dollar shortstop," or you probably go in another direction?
Yeah, I think so. And I can't remember. Because last year I think I ended up going with a dollar shortstop at the end. I took out Stevie Escobar. And Anderson said, well, if you talk about what you thought he was going to do for a dollar.
Yeah.
And I think Anderson Simmons probably ended up doing what I thought Escobar was going to do, even though they're both kind of seen as defense first shortstops.
I laugh, but I spent $30 on Jose Reyes, and see how that worked out for me. So, obviously, I don't think there's much debate about this, but maybe I'm wrong, so I'm going to ask you anyway. Chris Johnson, what he did last year in the average department was a total fluke. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And especially this year when you talk about Gaddis hitting ahead of him, because Gaddis is feast or famine. He's going to hit a home run or he's going to strike out. Johnson's not going to get as many sweet pitches as he got last year. With some of the guys who were hitting ahead of him. So, no, I think he's going to end up more like a 260, 270 hitter.
Yeah, I could see that. And I could even see higher than that, but I don't remember what he hit last year, but I think it was like 340 or somewhere closer to that. He may have even won the National League batting title if I don't know that for certain, but he was definitely up there in the race towards the end of the year. You mentioned Gaddis, and Gaddis has got huge power potential. He's obviously pretty raw as a player. He hasn't played a lot, but he's got the job to himself. It appears anyway. They do have Ryan Domit, who's not bad. Do you think that the team that takes Gaddis as its catcher is one that's going to be happy, or do you think that it was just a small sample size and pitchers are going to figure him out a little bit more?
I think it's going to depend on what kind of season Freddie Freeman has. I think Freddie Freeman lives up to the hype, which you want to talk about a guy that's getting a lot of hype right now. Freeman is probably at the top of that list. Then Gaddis, I think, can have a nice year. I think you don't want to. I think you'd rather take your chances with Gaddis, and I think he's shown, even with a small sample size, that if you serve it up to him, he's going to make you pay. Especially hitting there in Atlanta, which really tends to inflate that.
Yeah, you bring up Freddie Freeman, and I haven't been a huge Freeman fan the last 2 or 3 years. But even I cannot get behind his price at going for near $30. I think that's just too much.
Yeah, it is. I had Freddie Freeman last year, and I just kept waiting for him to take off and waiting for him to take off. And at the end of the year, his numbers were there, but I never felt there was one week where, like, Freddie Freeman would carry my team. And I think you're going to spend $30 more on a player, then I think you expect that. At some point in the season, that guy's going to have the kind of week that really just that propels your team to a win. And he never did that for me. So, I like Freeman. I think he's got a sweet swing. I love that he plays in Atlanta. But that's getting pretty pricey.
Yeah, and I mentioned how I like a lot of these starting pitchers, but I could not. I am complete opposite when you talk about the outfield. I could not be more out on Justin Upton and Jason Hayward.
Why does Hayward get to be their leadoff hitter? I'm looking at this lineup right now. They have projected as their leadoff hitter.
Yeah, it's kind of a broken roster. See, the problem with that is that you've got B.J. Upton, who just doesn't get on base. I think you kind of hope that he could win that job, but his on base percentage is probably like 250. Hayward does take walks. The only other candidate that's maybe your leadoff hitter is Andrelton Simmons, unless they wanted to go unconventional with like a Chris Johnson. There's just not a lot of candidates there. It's kind of a weirdly constructed roster with the way that they are so hit or miss with those strikeout guys, or it's all strikeouts, all home runs with Ugla, Gaddis, and Upton, the Upton brothers. So
yeah, they don't have a true leadoff hitter, not at all.
Yeah. I guess let's talk about the rest of the stacked division. We'll talk about the New York Mets. They did get Granderson, and I saw that Granderson hit a couple of home runs the other day in spring training, but I also saw an interesting stat. It said that whenever he gets I think it was a 93 mile an hour plus fastball, that his swing and miss rate is like 33% or something like that, which is crazy high. They even cited that 2 years prior to that, it was his strikeout or his swing and miss percentage, and 93 plus mile an hour fastballs at 18%. So it's obviously going in the wrong direction. If you can't catch up to the fastball, you're not going to last very long. But he hit a couple out in spring training. He's going to go cheap, and he's got good potential. He can run, he can hit for power. Do you see any value with Granderson this year?
It depends on how much he goes for. I had Granderson in 2012, and maybe it was all or nothing with this guy. He hit 3 or 4 home runs a week, but then he'd strike out. That's all he'd do is just strike out. And you almost look at the guy and you think he'd be more of like a speed threat, more of like a
absolutely
average kind of guy. But he's really just like it's home runs or nothing with him. And so it wouldn't hurt if you get down to the end of the draft and you're looking to fill a spot. You're willing to spend between $5 and $10, then I think you take it, because it wasn't long ago that he was going for $30-some, and that's what happens in our fantasy game is a guy has a down year like Matt Kemp, and all of a sudden they're forgotten about, and you can get him for freaking cheap. So Granderson might be worth that.
Hey, I just got to ask you this question: are you implying that just because Granderson is black and thin that you think he'd be fast and a good base runner?
I'm not going to say.
Okay. All right. At third base, David Wright, he was really good last year, and I've never been interested in David Wright, and I don't, what he did last year surprised me, I have to be honest. He stole a lot more bases than I thought he was capable of, and you have to keep in mind that his stats are, he missed a lot of time with injury, which, he's starting to do that now, but when he was healthy, he was great. I think this might be the first year where I would seriously consider making a bid on him.
I had David Wright last year, and when he didn't have the hamstring issues, he was pretty sweet from that standpoint. The only thing that bothers me is that he plays in that god-awful park. It's City Field or whatever it's called. And, when they moved over to that park, his power numbers went down. Mm-hmm. And so, I look at that and go, okay, if you're going to spend that much money for a third baseman, you want to be a guy that's going to rock the ball out of the yard. And I think that David Wright is hurt by the ballpark he plays. So, I don't know. I'm torn on that because he did do a nice job for me last year, but I'm real hesitant to pay that kind of money for what I think is lack of power potential.
And I'm just looking at this lineup, and outside of David Wright, it is pretty brutal. I mean, I guess they do have Daniel Murphy, who had a crazy good season last year, which I don't think many people are going to buy into. But you never know. He's a contact hitter, but I don't think there's any way he steals as many bases as he did last year.
No, he's going to go for more than he should.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about it, because people are going to buy on what he did last year, and I think those numbers are going to dip. He's not as good as those numbers said.
I have to be honest, Nick. There's not a whole lot to talk about with his team. I will talk about two more pitchers. Bartolo Colon making the move over to New York, and he goes from one great pitcher's park to still a pretty good pitcher's park in New York. I mean, you had him last year, didn't you? I don't even know where to begin, because I'm obviously. First of all, how is this guy on PEDs?
What are you talking about?
He get. I just don't get how you can look like that and be on PEDs.
No, I know. Well, that's what happens when you give yourself a steroid shot and eat a bunch of nachos, I guess. Yeah, I loved him last year. He was money for me, and he's going to another park that is very pitcher friendly. My only concern is he's going to the NL East. He was going to pitch against the Nationals. He was going to pitch against the Braves. But man, he gets to pitch against Miami a whole lot. He gets to pitch against Philadelphia. So, it's hard to say. He might be one of those late round $1 or $2 guys that might be worth taking.
Yeah, I could definitely see him and the next guy I'm going to bring up on your team, Zach Wheeler. I mean, first of all, when you picked up Zach Wheeler last year, how long did you think you were going to have to wait for him to get called up?
As long as it took, Ryan. As long as it took.
So you didn't think like, oh, he's going to be picked up in 2 or 3 days, I'll just hold on to him? Or did you think, I'm not?
No, the articles kept bullshitting me. I would read it and they'd be like, Zach Wheeler's going to be called up any day. I was like, all right. So I slid him into that slot, and I was willing to sit on him. And I mean, it worked out. He ended up doing a pretty good job once he got up there. It's so sad to look at this best rotation and not see Matt Martin.
Yeah, I agree. I was a believer very early on with what he was doing last year, and I was wanting him really bad this year.
Yeah. Look, Matt Harvey's going to be he's got a heck of a career, but it's just he's one of those pitchers. When after what he did last year, I was like, before he got hurt, I was like, hey, this guy's on my short list for next year. And then of course he blew out his elbow. So it is what it is.
Final question with this team: is Ike Davis even worthy of being on your watch list?
No, because I don't want to fight Big Ben for him.
All right, well said. Okay, let's talk about. I guess let's go to the Marlins, just so we don't end this podcast on the Marlins, and we'll end it on the Phillies. So the Marlins, I don't even know. I don't know. Hopefully you can bring it up. I'm trying to get to the roster because I'm off the top of my head, I can't even know what to talk about except for Mike Stanton and Jose Fernandez.
Hey, they have Rafael Furcal.
Yeah, they do have Furcal, and I have to be honest. I don't know if you're in the league or not. I know that's like the 4th time I've said that this year, but I think it was 2 years ago. I had Furcal on my team, and I think I picked him up off of waivers because I took a dollar shortstop and it didn't work out. But he was dominant. Obviously those days are behind him. I'm not expecting anything like that. But there were some times where Furcal was very useful in fantasy when he was healthy.
Was that his St. Louis days or his Dodger days?
No, it was St. Louis days, his first year.
Okay, so yeah, I would have been in the league that year. Okay, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so he was. I think he hit like 330 for like the first half of the year, something crazy.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't like Mike Stanton. He has injury issues. He doesn't have any protection in his lineup. I'm hearing a lot of, there's a little bit of noise about that Christian Yelich. Maybe one of those dollar guys you take late in the drafts. But other than that, I mean, obviously there's Jose Fernandez who, is going to be drafted for a ton of money. I just don't know what else to say about the Marlins. They should just go away.
Yeah, the worst franchise in baseball, no doubt about it. I will have to, and that's crazy because they've won, World Series in fairly recent memory. So, let me ask you this: Nate Eovaldi, is he worth $1 buy? He's a hard thrower, if nothing else. They say he's got some upside. Any thoughts on Eovaldi?
I don't remember. I've owned him at some point in our league. But, you look at, last year he was 4-6. Year before he was 4-13. I don't know what's to like. 119 innings pitched, 78 strikeouts. He's not a strikeout guy. He's not going to get you a lot of wins in Miami. He's going to be a 3+ ERA guy. I probably wouldn't touch him.
I was just looking at this depth chart, and Casey McGee, third-string third baseman. What happened to this guy? This guy used to be a great hitter.
Who, Casey McGee?
Yeah.
Wasn't he in Japan last year?
I have no idea, but he had some good seasons with the Brewers. I don't know what's gone on with his career. He's not old.
No, he's not old. I seriously think he was in Japan last year.
That's crazy. I wonder why his career's taken such a tailspin.
Yeah, he has no stats for 2013.
Wow.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's right. He was over in Japan last year. Yeah, he was with the Rakuten Golden Eagles, and they won a championship. So he led them to a
MVP.
So take that to the bank, baby. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll end this up with the Phillies. Last year, going into the season, you're like, wow, Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, Cole Hamels, this team is stacked. And obviously we knew the hitting was going to be a problem. This year, Halladay's retired. Cliff Lee's still there. Hamels looks like he might start the year missing a week or two or however long. Obviously, Cliff Lee still had a pretty good year last year. Is he in your top 5 at pitcher, or do you think he's going to decline with his he's getting up there in years?
He's not in my top 5, but I think he's probably going to end up in the top 5 of that's hard to say because you look at, you got Kershaw, you got Wainwright, you've got Fernandez, you've got Scherzer.
I was wondering if you're going to include Scherzer.
What about Scherzer?
I was wondering if you're going to include him or not. No, I totally agree. I'm all in on Scherzer.
Yeah, we haven't even got. We're not even talking about the American League, so we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I can't drool over Scherzer.
Well, you couldn't get off the podcast without not mentioning his name, even if it wasn't meant to come up.
Oh God, I love that guy. So Cliff Lee, he's going to go probably for between $25 and $30. You think, or you think he'll go more than 30?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think our league isn't willing to go as high on pitchers, so I think he's going to go for, I think he went for like 25 last year. I could see him going for, 27 or so this year.
Yeah, that might be worth it. I think Cliff Lee is probably, and when I look at that rotation, probably the one guy I don't. I heard Cole Hamels probably be out till at least midday. I heard he had a setback today on the radio, so that might be one of those guys you have to draft and stash. I don't like A.J. Burnett going to Philadelphia. I think that he had a great year in Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's a low-pressure situation. By August, no matter how good the Pirates are, the fans are already focused on the Steelers, But in Philadelphia, those fans are brutal, and I think he sucked in New York, too, in that high-pressure situation. So I'm not a fan of Burnett in Philadelphia at all.
Yeah, I liked Burnett last year, but I also do not like him because Philadelphia's it's a great hitter's park, so that's going to work against him too. Just looking at this lineup, they got Rollins, Utley, Ryan Howard, Dominic Brown, who was pretty good last year as well, and then they've got Marlon Byrd. Crazy as it might sound, Marlon Byrd might be the best hitter in that lineup.
Yeah, which is sad because I think that last year was a fluke on his season. I also think it was a fluke on Dominic Brown. I don't see much about this lineup that I like at all. As a matter of fact, if I were to end up getting stuck with one player on this team that I wouldn't mind getting stuck with because it was late in the draft or whatever, it's probably Carlos Ruiz.
Oh, interesting. I thought you were going to go with Chase Utley.
No, if you end up with Utley, and you can get him for $3 or $4 as your second baseman and you can stay healthy, then I think that pays off for you. But Marlon Byrd, not touching him. Dominic Brown, probably not touching him. Jimmy Rollins, no. I'd probably take that kid out of Houston, the shortstop, right to Jimmy Rollins. I just don't see much to like here.
So, do you think that the Phillies could potentially finish behind the Mets or the Marlins, or you're not willing to go that far?
No, because I think they have enough pitching to keeping in third place. I think that it's going to be first and second, Washington, Atlanta, and I think it's going to be a huge drop-off before you get to Philadelphia. I don't think there's another team in that division that comes close to finishes 500.
Okay. Well, I kind of forgot to ask you the last division. So we both agree that the NL Central winner is probably going to be the Cardinals. That's our pick. NL West, the Dodgers are the heavy favorite, but there are a couple of decent teams out there. Are they your pick?
No, they're not. I think the San Francisco Giants will win that division. If Matt Cain can bounce back, and the addition of Hudson, because Hudson's just a gritty veteran and knows how to pitch, I think the Giants will win that division.
That's a pretty bold call. I'm still going to play it safe and go with the Dodgers, but I like the Giants quite a bit too. The rotation looks pretty good with Tim Hudson as a number 4, and the lineup is underrated with Pence and Sandoval if he can stay healthy, which is kind of his name, Sandoval, if you can stay healthy. It's a good overall team, and what they did last year that's uncharacteristic. So we got 2 teams each. Let's go to the NL East. It's pretty much a 2-team race. It's the Braves, it's the Nationals. Everybody was buying into the Nationals hype last year, and everybody got burned. Are you going to do it again, or are you going to go with the Braves?
No, I'm going to go with the Nationals. I think the Nationals bounce back and win the division this year. I think those younger players that they put a lot on to win the division are a year older, and I think that they're gonna win it.
All right, yeah, it's a tough call for me. I love both of their rotations. I think the Nationals is a little bit better, and I think their lineup is probably a little bit better too. So I'm gonna agree with you. I don't know. I kind of feel like the Braves will pull it out, but my just using my head trying to reason through it makes me pick the Nationals. So we've got 3 teams each. We each get 2 wild card teams. Who are your 2 wild card picks?
My 2 wild card picks are the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Okay, and I am going to go. You kind of talked me into the Giants. I'm going to go with the Giants and the Braves, and I'm going to say the Cardinals are the only team to make the playoffs out of the Central. I think what the Pirates did last year was more fluke than anything they're going to do this year. So I'm out on the Pirates. I think that they will finish under 500.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this: if the upkicks come out and hit the ball, out of the gate, then I might change my mind and go with Atlanta over Pittsburgh. But that Atlanta lineup, I don't like the way it's constructed, so I'm just not a believer in it.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I feel, but they somehow managed to do it last year. I will say this: that the Pirates have they've got some talented prospects coming up. Jamison Tyon, a pitching prospect, could help boost their rotation a little bit, and they've also got Gregory Polanco, a very talented outfielder that's pushing to make their opening day roster. So 2 things to watch for that team that could be better than how they look on paper today.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope that one of them is a leadoff hitter because they need one.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, not really, man. Just really looking forward to the 15th. All right, I'm ready to get this thing going and ready to have y'all over so we can have a really good draft party.
All right, it sounds good. And just to be honest here, I know I was being a little overly ambitious, but I thought that we could maybe squeeze this into an hour. It's been an hour 38, including my little intro before I gave you the call. But thanks for the impromptu podcast. Lucky that I caught you when your family was out of town. I don't know how I was so lucky to do that, but thank you for your time on the show.
No problem, man. Thanks for calling.
All right, I'll talk to you later.